Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to Late Nights in Bed with OhSheReads, episode 2. And welcome to my late night podcast style, variety hour where I talk about whatever I want. And I'm really enjoying this series. And I'm just enjoying the freedom of it and how relaxed it is, and that you're in bed with me. It's super chill. And in tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about something that could be somewhat controversial. And we're going to be talking about the pressure to like books by Black authors. Yes. The pressure to like books by Black authors. Now, ever since I really started making booktube videos, we have really had this call for diversity, this demand for diversity. And now, of course, as you know, diversity doesn't just mean diversifying the race of characters. We also need diversity in so many ways, in various ways. We need as many fictional characters represented as we have types of people, so that eventually people can really see themselves reflected in what they read, and that it won't be so strange to pick up a book and find a character who is similar to you and that has had similar experiences and identifies in similar ways to you, whether that be socioeconomically, gender, sexual orientation, and yes, race, culture, class, all that good stuff. So, of course, the loudest, part of this movement has been wanting to see more Black characters coming out of books that are being published. Absolutely. And as a Black woman, this has been something near and dear to my heart. This has been something that I've been championing ever since I got a platform to speak about books and to talk about everything that I talk about here on BookTube. And the great news is, in the last 2 to 3 years, there has been a huge surge in books being published that center Black people, that center Black characters, that talk about our concerns, that also are broader than just depicting Black trauma and Black pain. We also have Black characters, doing fantastical things in fantasy worlds and saving the world and having powers and having agency and going on their own hero's journey. It's all been really great and very exciting. Now, what starts to happen is, if you're like me, you start to pre-order all of these books because you're just so absolutely thrilled, right? The marketing machine that these publishers have is truly, truly over the top. It's ingenious. You see all the covers, all these beautiful, richly melanated covers. They're usually so absolutely mind-blowingly beautiful, especially in the YA genre. I mean, these covers are just screaming at you to pre-order and purchase these books. Not to mention, as someone who grew up not seeing my image reflected on a book cover, not seeing characters who look like me in books, it has been the greatest pleasure to now walk into a bookstore and to go into the fiction section and be inundated by books that have richly melanated people on the covers. I mean, it's absolutely, oh my goodness, it's so fulfilling. It's so hard to describe if it's not something that you're familiar with. If you are not a person of color, I hate that term, but we're going to use it. If you're not a Black person or another person of color, and you're just always used to seeing your image represented, it's not a feeling that I can really describe to you. It's not a feeling that you're familiar with, but there is a level of reverence, of satisfaction, of joy, of relief, of letting out that breath you didn't know you were holding that you feel when you're able to walk into a bookstore and see cover upon cover upon cover, book upon book upon book that have Black characters on the cover, okay? It is something that I'm so excited about because this generation is not going to have the problem that my generation had of not being able to see yourself represented on a book cover or in a book. So, of course, you pre-order all of them if you're me, and you're so excited. And when they get here, you're so thrilled. You can't wait to read them. You start reading them immediately. And then the letdown comes. Oh my gosh, this is so hard to speak on. And this is something that I talk about with my friends in our group chat all the time. And we're like, oh my goodness, did you get so and so's book? Yes, I did. I can't wait. Oh my goodness. Okay, the book has arrived. Have you read it? ... Yeah, I tried to, I DNF'd. Or yes, I did. And it wasn't great. It was not well written. It had plot holes. It fell apart in the second half. You know, the writing was very, very mediocre and childish. You know, the story just wasn't gelling. It just wasn't coming together. And then there's that like complete feeling of overwhelming guilt, right? Because as a book reviewer and as content creators, we talk about the books that we read online. And if you've ever wondered why you haven't seen all these videos of me talking about all of the books that I've hauled and that I've shown, whether it's on my Instagram story or in my book hauls, these books by Black authors, the ones that you just never see me speak on again, there's a reason for that. Because what happens when I read a book written by a Black author that was like overly hyped or really being pushed hard by the publishers, or that people were really excited to get, this book was everywhere. You saw it in everyone's TBR. When you see that I'm not talking about it, there's a reason, because more than likely, I didn't like it. And as a Black content creator who is also an aspiring Black author who wants to be hopefully traditionally published one day, and who champions reading books by Black authors written for Black people, by Black people, it gets very, very dicey when it comes to critiquing their books. I will say that this is especially true for me when it comes to debut authors. I almost want to say it's solely exclusive to debut authors because they're just starting out. They just got their book deal recently, obviously. They're new on the scene, and this is their debut. And you don't want to come out publicly saying you don't like the book, critiquing it harshly, and therefore, if you have people that watch you, that trust your opinion, that follow your reviews, they're going to take your words to heart. And now there's a Black author who has a strike against them, and a lot of people who may not even read Black to begin with, may not even really necessarily read Black authors or read anything Black outside of Black History Month. Let's say they picked up the book because they saw me haul it or show it in a TBR video or talk about it. And now here I am with the review talking about how I didn't like it. So then they're going to be less likely to read it if they haven't already, to move forward with their plans for reading it. Or I have this fear that it's going to create this gateway where it's now going to become a bash fest on this book, and I've okayed it. And this is how you think as a Black person, especially in the West. You think, I do not want to become the reason that another Black person who's doing their best and living their dreams gets like has a strike against them. I do not want to be used as the excuse for why it's okay to come down hard on this book written by a Black author. I do not want to be that person that opened the gate and that rolled out the red carpet for, let's just get all the way real here, people, for non-Black people, for white people, non-Black people of color to now come and feel like it's okay to tear apart this book and heavily, those rant reviews, right? Because, oh, it's okay because a Black girl came out and did a rant review and and obviously I'm not talking about books that I read that were like 3 stars or that I was like, okay, this was okay. I'm not talking about that, y'all. I'm talking about books that I've read that were just not good, where I'm wondering, how did this even get published? How did this get optioned for publishing? Where was the editor in this process? What? And obviously, I'm not going to be naming any book specifically because that's part of what we're talking about today. The guilt that you feel and how hard it is to come out and talk about you not liking the book, especially as a Black reviewer. It's extremely difficult. I don't want to be the reason why non-Black reviewers think it's okay to tear apart books by Black authors. It's already hard enough watching reviews from non-Black reviewers saying, oh, I didn't like it because I couldn't relate to her. Okay, just say that it made you uncomfortable to read a book centering a Black person and call it a day, because that's essentially what you're saying in a roundabout manner. What do you mean you couldn't relate to her? Can you also relate to the fairies that you love reading about in ACOTAR? Can you relate to all of these fantastical creatures that you enjoy reading about in fantasy? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Can you relate to the historical romances that you read and to the characters in there from the 14, 15, 16, 1700s? Make it make sense, okay? If you're one of these people and you're watching this somehow, and you have said something like this after reading a book by a Black author centering Black characters, that you did not like it, and your main reason was that you couldn't feel like you could relate to the characters, do you understand how stupid that sounds now? Do you understand how that is basically a like whistle, like a what do you call those? Silent whistle for you basically just saying that you feel that you just uncomfortable reading about Black people and them being centered in stories, because that's essentially what you're saying. Because everything else that you read, I guarantee you there's a lot in it that you can't relate to, but you still love it because your image is being represented. So it's hard enough watching reviews where non-Black reviewers give books written by Black authors that are actually good, that are well written, that are interesting, that have great character journeys and arcs, and that are really doing great things and opening doors and paving ways. They read these books and they give them 3 stars, 2 stars, 2.5, or even worse, they'll give it 4 or 5 stars, but really have nothing of substance to say in their reviews, right? It sounds very like phoned in. It's just like, oh yeah, I gave it 5 stars because, read diversely, and it's so important that we read diversely. And, I just think it's an important book and I really enjoyed it. This usually happens around Black History Month as well, either in Black History Month or around it. And you just hear these half-hearted, lackadaisical, lackluster ass reviews that are, you're rating the book highly, but you have nothing of true substance to say, or you're rating the book poorly and your reasonings are just you saying in a roundabout way that you're uncomfortable with the characters being Black and reading about Black people. It's very cringe. And so I get tired of seeing that. And so that adds to my reasonings for not wanting to come out publicly speaking out against books that I didn't like. And not just because I didn't like the story, but because I just didn't feel that the book was well written and that it should have been published in this, in the stage that it was at. Like the way that it was published, it needed a few more revisions. Yeah, y'all remember my Zenith rant review? Yeah, I'm very, very hesitant to give that same level of critique to a book written by a Black author. This is just a very honest, this is just a very honest moment right now. And I'm just being plain, cold, plain, brutal truth here. And then I have to start thinking a little bit deeper, right? We always have to dissect these things and we always have to unpack. So, where is the guilt coming from, right? The guilt is coming from a place where I don't want to come down hard or harshly critique books written by Black authors because I want these Black authors to have a chance, especially if they're debut authors, like I mentioned before. I want them to have a chance to win over the audience, okay? If the first book wasn't that great, I want them to have a chance with their second or their third or maybe even their fourth. I also want the market to become more saturated by books written by Black authors so that the poorly written books are not the norm. In fact, they become in the very, very small minority because there'll be so many books written by Black authors and there'll be so many options and choices to choose from that it'll be just like books written by white authors. You notice that it's very easy for us to harshly rant about and critique books written by white authors because books written by white authors completely oversaturate the market. And so white authors in their oversaturation are allowed to have a range, okay? They're allowed to write really, really bad books that we can tear apart and make rant reviews about and drag and make funny memes. And they're allowed to write amazing books that everyone loves and we give 5 stars. And they're allowed to write a good solid 3-star book or a 2-star book or a 4-star. Like the market is so oversaturated by their books, their image being represented, that they have more agency and they have more opportunity and more range. And so I do not want to come down on books written by Black authors that center Black characters because we have not yet reached that stage where we are so prevalent in the market that we have so much agency and so much range that it's not going to be a detrimental, it's not going to be detrimental to tear apart this one book because there's so many other books that are amazing and well written and that are flooding the market and that are coming out and that people are excited for. We are not there yet, okay? We're still in a place of newness with this. We are still in a place where people are just now starting to find out about SFF, right? And are just now starting to read Afrofuturism and reading, books that are science fiction and fantasy centering Black characters. We're just now starting to get more diversity in the genres. And we still don't really have new adult books written, by Black authors centering Black characters. We still don't really have that. So there's still scarcity in the market in all areas. And so that's where the guilt comes from. That's where the concern comes from. That's where the worry comes from. I do not want to be the reason why people now have yet another reason or excuse not to read Black. I don't want to be their excuse. I don't want to open that doorway. I am holding back until we are in a place where we have more agency and we have more choices. And it's not just this small selection of Black books by Black authors in YA and this small selection in literary fiction and this small selection in Afro SFF and this small selection in nonfiction and this. No, I want it to be at a level where there are so many choices, so many options. We have such variety that we're able to honestly critique. Now, I see the other side of this argument, right? Which is, well, if you want equality, then you have to make it okay for books by Black authors to be criticized and critiqued on the same level as books by white authors, let's say. And it has to be acceptable for that to happen because we're asking for equality of opportunity, right? We're asking for just as many Black authors who are submitting manuscripts and who are going on submission to and querying and stuff. We're asking for equality of opportunity. We're asking for, just as many Black authors to receive the opportunity to have their books published as the white authors. And I understand that. And I understand that argument because that's very valid. It's like, okay, well, if you want that equality and you want that oversaturation in a way, or just saturation, can we just get to saturation, forget oversaturation? Then you have to be willing to come to the table and play ball. But here's the thing. We're not on an even playing field. That's what destroys that whole argument. We're not on an even playing field at all. We are still at a huge, steep disadvantage. We are still considered new and like books by Black authors centering Black characters. It's not like straight up trauma and not like a straight slavery narrative. Oh, what? Oh my God. This is so exciting. We're still there. And so the playing field is not even. And so that's why we can't come to the table and play ball. And that's why I hold back. That's why I hold back. And everyone who's Black doesn't have the same idea as me. There are Black reviewers out there that feel comfortable critiquing books by Black authors. And again, for me, I almost want to exclusively just limit this to debut authors and to honestly like the YA genre, because in literary fiction, I feel a lot more comfortable being more critical because we have more abundance in that genre of Black authors writing Black characters. We have a lot more trauma stories and slavery stories, and those books are important. But we have a lot more range there and more variety. And so I feel a little bit more comfortable. And even then, if I really did not like a book written by a Black author, even in the literary fiction genre, I just won't talk about it. I just won't talk about it. I won't bring it to the forefront because I don't want to limit or influence people from reaching for it. People that don't even normally reach for Black books to begin with. I guess that's where I'm going with this. I do not want to dissuade anyone that normally doesn't reach for Black books to begin with and it's already like out of their comfort zone. I don't want to dissuade them from choosing to read a particular book if they choose to. Now, what their thoughts will be once they read it, I don't know. I don't know if they'll feel the same way as I do. I don't know if they will feel that way and then feel guilty for feeling that way and then also not want to speak on it because they feel it's not their place because they're not Black. And now that is something that I want to talk about as well. I don't have that mentality of, oh, you're not a Black reviewer, so you cannot harshly critique a book written by a Black author. Or you can't, maybe harshly critique is the wrong word. You can't give your opinion, okay? If a white book reviewer says they didn't like a book written by a Black author and they give their reasonings and I listen to the review, I read the review and I see, just like any other review out there, as long as the reasons aren't asinine, like we discussed earlier, and that aren't just like literal dog whistles for, I don't know, microaggressions and racism, I don't see a reason why people feel some sort of way about that. They're just a person who happens to be white, who read a book that happens to be by a Black author that they didn't necessarily enjoy, wasn't necessarily their cup of tea. But at least they read it, at least they reached for it, and hopefully they will continue to reach for more books by Black authors and hopefully find some that they'll really truly connect with and enjoy. If they're coming to it in good faith and they're coming to it from a place of just, I was curious about this book, I wanted to read it, just like any other book out there. And it's not some sort of diversity ploy or it's not during Black History Month and they feel pressured. It's not coming from a disingenuous place, and it's simply just a reader who happens to be white picking up a book that they were interested in that happens to be by a Black author. They read it. It wasn't for them. They didn't like it so much. These are their reasonings. The reasonings make sense. I think that's perfectly fine, because I have seen that on book Twitter of people saying, well, you're not an Own Voices reviewer, and I felt like you were unnecessarily harsh. And that's certainly a discussion that can be had, and we can open up that dialogue. And it is annoying when non-Own Voices reviewers have the access to getting ARC copies of books written by Black authors before the actual Black reviewers themselves. Now, that's a completely separate issue, and that is annoying AF. And something that really, I think some publishers are really working to rectify that disparity, which I appreciate. But I think that that's a separate topic and a separate subject all in and of itself. But yeah, how do you all feel about this topic? If you are a Black reviewer, content creator, book blogger, etc., do you feel the same way that I do, or do you not feel the same way as I do? And if you don't feel the same way as I do, please feel free to share in the comments, because this is literally an internal battle that I have with myself every time I read a book by a Black author that I just hate. I know that's a strong word, but it's happened. And I always struggle with this, and ultimately I choose silence. And ultimately I just choose to hold my thoughts and keep them to myself and not put them on the internet. Because again, especially, almost exclusively, it pertains to debut authors for me. And I do not want to tarnish their name before they even really have gotten started. So that's kind of how I look at it and how I come to it. So I would be very curious to hear your thoughts if you have an opposite opinion from me, and if you regularly critique books by Black authors, especially debut authors, that you didn't like, and you're very honest about that in your reviews. I mean, there are definitely people who are, and I just would love to have the dialogue with you, because I'm still in that place where I'm not sure. And because I'm not sure, I'm in the holding cell, and I'm going to refrain from really taking any action if I'm not sure how I feel. And I still feel this guilt. But yeah, this is something that is discussed a lot among my other content creator friends, especially those of us who are Black, and just the pressure that we feel to like books by Black authors. And when we don't like the book and we're let down, how we then just choose silence and we just choose to not speak on it. And if we do speak on it, it's in very, very vague terms. We almost never mention the book by name or the author by name. We are very, very general, and we just keep it to that. And I've noticed that we all seem to have similar reasonings, where we don't want to tarnish the author's name. They're a debut author. We want other people to want to pick up the book, and we do not want to influence people negatively. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Very curious to know what y'all think about this topic, especially if you are a white reviewer or a non-Black person of color. I would be even more interested to know your thoughts on this. And if you feel any misgivings about reviewing books by Black authors and why that is. So can't wait to chat with y'all in the comments. That is it for tonight's episode. I don't really have too many other thoughts on this. This is somewhat of a taboo subject. It is very sensitive, and I know people can feel some type of way about when it comes to talking about stuff like this. So please be respectful. Please share your comments, with humility and kindness, and even if you have a differing opinion, again, please just be respectful with your comments. If you're not, you will be blocked and your comment will be deleted. Yay! All right, so that's it for this episode of Late Nights in Bed with OhSheReads. Thank you so much for joining me. I just want to take this opportunity to say, give this video a like if you enjoyed it. If you want to see more late nights in bed with OhSheReads, also leave me a comment. What would you like me to discuss? Because I talk about whatever I want, and it doesn't have to be book centered or book related. We can talk about politics. We can talk about religion. We can talk about Demi Lovato being a Karen. What the heck, Demi? Why? If you don't know what I'm talking about, good for you. If you do, you feel my pain. But yes, so we can talk about anything. So leave a comment down below. What would you like to discuss? And maybe I'll do one of these episodes live one of these nights. I think that would be really cool to do it live. But yeah, let me know, and give this video a like. I have to do all my YouTube things. And I would really appreciate you subscribing. And I will catch you in my next episode of Late Nights in Bed with OhSheReads. Mwah! Bye. Bye, y'all.